Right, centre console parts now, and they all need a fair amount of work. So the actual centre console bit itself I've already cleaned up, and that's not too bad. It's just making the part a little bit more crisp, that's all. So that's done and ready for paint. I just want to check that these parts fit in. I wouldn't expect them not to, because holes have all been quite oversized. Yeah, so no problems with that. So the next thing is tidying these parts up. Yeah, they're a little bit of a mess. It's just seemed clean up on this one, but you can see how much sink there is in the top of that. So I think we can possibly sand that flush or get it looking better, because it is actually a soft sort of leatherette, the same sort of material as the seats in the middle, so a little bit of an elbow print wouldn't be completely off bounds. And then we've got the gear shift, which originally was a chromed part, but I mean, it's got massive ejector pins on the side. It's the whole thing's just a bit of a mess, so we need to tidy that up. So I'm going to use my precision nippers. Go, and then we have to round this off. It's got a half round, but we need to turn it into a full round. So a fair bit of shaping work to be done on that part, so let's do that first. I'm gonna go in with fairly coarse grit to start with, a 400 grit, and just get that shape. There we go. It doesn't take much to get it sort of where you need it. Okay, now we need to get the seam off it, so just gonna scrape that seam away. And then finish it with a gentle sand. It's the same on this side. Seems quite heavy on this side, almost like the mould slipped, but I think it's just not very accurate tooling really. Okay, that's looking okay. And then we need something a little coarser just to take this ejector pin down. There we go, and then we can finish with a 400 there. Okay, that is looking good to me, so I'm going to say that part is cleaned up and ready for paint. And then with this part, once again, just get rid of that quite heavy seam. Now, if you're interested to know about my seam scraper, I have done a video on it. It's the Zukimura seam scraper, and you can go and check that out in my tools playlist. There we go, that's looking good. And we do need to put a lock on this, but we'll do that after painting it. Okay, so next thing is to sort out this little bit of sink on the top. So I don't know anybody else that makes these, but I have these abrasive cards. So the plastic cards with abrasives on, and they're all the same size, although I've cut a bit off that one I've trimmed and used for various things, but they all come in the same size, and I've had these for years and they're really good for these sort of jobs. I'm just giving them a quick clean. What I like about them is the size. So they must put sheets of this abrasive onto plastic sheets and then cut it, because you can sometimes see a join line on them. But they're all different grits, so that's the biggest grit, then that one, and that one, and that one. But it's their size that makes them really good for the job we're about to do. go. Moves out of my way. So we're just going to go around in a circle, but because this is wider than that, I've got a better area for circular sanding. There you go, and that's almost got it out straight away. Just do a little bit more and then we'll drop down the grit to make it nice and smooth. There we go, and just give that a clean now we're finished. There we go, and then we go to the next grit. And then the next one. And then finally this nice smooth one. And there you go. It's flat as a pancake and really nice and smooth. So yeah, happy with that. Already see me clean up one of the front seats. I've got the other one to do. I'm not going to show you that again, so I'll do that off camera. And that then takes us to the roll cage, which is wholly incorrect for the General Lee. So we have a lot of work to do. The parts themselves, not only are they the wrong shape completely, but yeah, they are such a mess with ejector pin marks and stuff that the amount of effort to make them look right, even if you did want to incorrectly use them, is ridiculous. What we actually need is something that is N-shaped, but back to front. So in the actual General Lee, you've got an N shape, but the top of the N, which should be, if you imagine this bit here, which should be behind the driver because it's acting as a support for the driver, it was in the way of the camera, so they turned it around the other way. So you want a back to front N in here. So this is only really useful for giving me some length, some dimensions. It's not even worth cutting this out and using it because there's so much cleanup on it that it will take longer than gluing these bits together. So I've got 2 dimensions here of plastic rod, and we're going to try and use that to simulate the padding. So let's have a look at what it actually looks like. Okay, so I've knocked up the kit's roll cage so that I can use it for some dimensions. And what I want to do is I want to make basically a loop that goes inside the interior tub, just in front of the seats. So it's going to go there at this point here. So I need it to be sort of this height. So if we put that in, you can see, yeah, so this area here is the bit that wants a roll cage. All the rest of it we don't need. So we need to have one span that goes across there like so, and then we need to have our little spar that goes down. So let's have a look at that. Now the other thing is it wants to be bent rather than joint. So rather than it being joined, it needs to sort of be the right length, then bend. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a length there, and we're just gonna put a bend in. Like so. And I'm going to put another bend there. And then we're going to cut that to length there, like so. So in theory, that's my first part of the roll cage in. And then I need a spar going across. I just need to make sure it sort of looks right and level and what have you. My tube is actually breaking. That's not good, is it? I think I might have to join it rather than bend it. That's annoying. Okay, we'll try that again. So we need that length. And then 2 pieces. So they'll be too long, but it gives me some adjustment room. And then I need a piece that's sort of that long. I can probably take that out of my bent one, that would be better. So that wants to be about so long. And then I want a short, the narrower tube going from floor so those are my parts. So we need to join these together now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sand a little flat on each end of this, making sure that it's nice and square. And then square off the end of my tube, and we can glue that in and then blend it in afterwards. So let's get some plastic magic, and to stop it rolling around I'm gonna just put it in a couple of clamps. And I'm hoping that will also help me keep the tube in place, so I can take the clamp off and clamp it while it's gluing. So I have my tube and I've sanded a little flat on the end, and I'm just going to hold that with my clip there, which is going to allow me to sort this end out. I need a slightly longer flat there because we're going to have two pieces joining. So just going to level the ends of the tubes. At this stage I'm not worried about cleaning up all the sort of the swarthy rough edge, because it'll just melt and be extra strength. So I think they're now the same length. Yeah. Right, with the first one in place, we can do the same again. Plop that in, flood it with glue. This evergreen white plastic loves adhesive, it melts really nicely. There we go. And then I'm just going to clamp that one also. Okay, that doesn't look straight to me. Like me constantly moving it for some reason. There we go. So the next section is this one, which is going to go into the corner there. So I need to actually put a little wedge shape on it. So it's going to go in there like that. So that's nearly there. Yeah, looks good. I'm just going to straighten the end off. So why have I got thicker and thinner tube? Well, the thick tube has the sort of foam on it, the padding, and then thinner tube is just the actual metal frame. There we go. Just going to hold that there for a sec. And that's going to want to come down to the floor really, so I'm just going to correct the angle. There we go. So I'm just going to let all of that dry for a minute or two, and then we can put this last section in, which will make the whole thing a little bit more rigid. Just want to make sure that doesn't drop on me. Yeah, I think that's better. So if we straighten off this edge, so we've got a nice flat to work with. And then we need to cut that there. Like that. I just need to shape that a little bit. I could do this with a round file, but I'm just cutting a little V in, which will just help that sit. Like so. Okay, let's get that glued in, and that'll make everything a bit more rigid then. So put some glue on, and we put some more on, that'll sit on top better. My basic frame is made. What I want to do now is just cap off the ends, so I'm just going to level this one a little bit. And then we're going to put some plastic card on, and that's going to be used as a cap on both sides. So just get myself some adhesive. So I'm just going to plop that on, hold it in place, just let that bond for a sec. There we go. And do the same on that, and then we've not got open tubes. Okay, that's all looking good. We'll sand it. We might have to put a little bit of filler in, but that's essentially my roll cage bit done. So I'm going to leave that to harden for a little while, and we can move on to the next job. So as I look at the instructions, that's the exterior. So most of the exterior is already done, but I do have windscreen wipers to make, and I do need to think about these parts that flip into the grille. So let's have a look at those. So these parts here are supposed to go in, and they have a little line on them, as you can see, because one section flips up to let the headlight open, and they just don't look right to me, and they don't particularly fit very well. So what I think I'm going to do is I am going to use them, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to thin them. So there's a raised lip on the inside. I'm going to take that off so it's flush, and I'm going to tighten up the edges a little bit, and then hopefully it will fit better and look better. It won't be quite sitting quite so proud, because it's not noticeable on the car, on the actual car particularly. So I need to get my little sanding pads out again. We'll do some circular sanding, and actually I'm not sure I can hold it particularly well. We'll have a go. I found that it was slipping from my fingers because it's got rounded edges, so it's a more traditional get in there and file it, but we can go really coarse on this job and take it back really quickly. So when I'm doing jobs like this, I start at one section and get that flat, and then move along a little bit and do a little section at a time, so I'm not putting too much stress on the part. So we will have taken about 3/4 millimeter out of this. So what we'll do now is just tidy that up. And then we can plop it in and see what we think, what it looks like. Don't think we're quite flush there. And we're just gonna reduce that down a little bit. There we go. So I think that looks okay. So we'll make sure I've got nice crisp edges. So I'm just going to give the part a little wash, get rid of all the dust, and then we'll see what it looks like slotted into place. Well, I definitely think the reworked part looks better. It doesn't sit as proud. It's much more in keeping with what this should look like. So yeah, we'll rework that one, and then they're ready to go. The body is ready for a clean and final prime. So it's feeling like we are getting there, to be honest. So what we're going to do is we're going to give this a good prime up, and then we're going to paint the detail parts before we paint the bodywork, which I know sounds odd, but it's easier to mask the grille than to mask the bodywork afterwards to paint the grille, if that makes sense. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. So ahead of further priming, we're going to glue these little covers in place. So the real key is to ensure that they are spaced equally and they look the same on both sides. that looks right to me. So we'll just let them dry into place, and that's that ready. So the last thing to do is make the windscreen wipers. So we already folded one previously when we were checking which size we need, so we know these work pretty well. I think we were on longer wiper blades, weren't we? So I'm going to keep the wiper blades separate for now because it's going to be easier to paint them and glue them in separately, already painted. So that's the wiper blades done, and then it's a quick bend. And that's our wipers done and ready for painting. Well, that is all of my parts cleaned up, ready to be primed, ready to be painted. So it's been quite a journey, a lot of reworking of most of the parts one way or another. So other than tidying up the roll cage, everything is pretty much done. So the next job is to prime everything. So our exhaust tips, well, maybe the less said about them, the better. I don't want them on my model. So what I want to do is make new ones, and to do that I've cut a length off some plastic tube. That's roughly the same diameter, fractionally larger maybe, but that's not a problem. And what I'm doing is I'm just gently feathering in the edge, so I'm just putting a little chamfer on so that it meets the exhaust okay and looks like it's an integral part of the exhaust system. And then I'm just going to flatten out this end where I've just cut it off the tube and make sure that's all good. And then using my pencil, I'm going to just mark out the point where we get this little flattening of the tip, which is there. And then using a pair of flat pliers, we're just going to gently give it a squeeze. Get those out of the way. And that gives us an open-ended exhaust. And then all we need to do is glue that in place like on there, and we're good to go. That's one I've already done. So I'm using extra thin quick drying. And we just have to make sure that it's straight, that's the main thing. There we go. New exhaust tips. So I'm just going to let those dry for a minute, and then we're going to paint them in stainless steel. Right then, time to move this bodywork forward a little bit. The primer has been on about a week now, and what I want to do is, it's fairly rough. I mean, it's got a relatively coarse feel. If I was painting a tank, maybe, I'd go, you know what, this is okay. But for a car, this is not even close to okay. I have a little bit of work to do. I've got to do a little bit of filling on this end here where it's not quite where I want it to be, but otherwise, in the main, it's okay. And what I wanted to do was just strip it down and polish it up, and what have you. So I'm often asked about abrasives. I've been asked many times over the years, you know, how do you use abrasives? What's the technique? What's the way of working? And generally, what I would say is, don't worry about it too much. Your general rule of thumb is you start coarser and work to finer, and every time you change your grit, you go in a different direction. Those are your two general principles, if you like, of adhesives. When it comes to something like this, however, your understanding of abrasives is absolutely much more important. So there is so many different types of abrasives on the market. I mean, I have a box full of them. I mean, this is all pretty much virgin stuff, sanding sticks and the like. Okay, I've used that, but so there is tons of stuff out there. So if you're not really familiar with abrasives, it can be a little bit of a nightmare. If you are relatively new to the hobby, and you've never really put much thought to abrasives, then what I would say is a good starting point is a multi-pack of abrasive sticks or something like that. So something that comes with different grits in. For more complex jobs like this, and this is a complex job because we've got complex shapes and we need to get really into the detail, because that's what we're doing here, we're detailing. Then what you want is a good selection pack of wet and dry. The reason is the abrasive performs differently when it's wet to when it's dry. Depending on what you're sanding, you may want it wet to keep the dust down, and when it's wet, you're also making an abrasive paste, which adds a sort of a polishing element to it. And you know, this pack, this goes from 180 grit to 1000 grit, and I think that's a really good range. And if you get these sheets like this, you can cut little bits off and do what you need. But the basic principles of coarsest grit to least coarse grit and going in opposite directions, that never changes. Okay, so if you're going to be doing lots of sort of high shine surfaces, say like a car body, then you probably also want to get some finer grits as well. So I've got these, I've used these for years, and these start at 1500 grit and go down to 12,000 grit. And you're sort of, this is really sort of basic polishing. And I say basic polishing because I use this before a clear coat. And then once clear coat, you then are in the realms of polishing. So you're either using things like the Tamiya polishing compounds, which they come with polishing sponges as well. They're quite expensive, and difficult to come by, very difficult to come by, or polishing compounds, and usually you find they come in coarse, medium, fine, with cloths that you use with them, damp cloths that you use with them. So there's all sorts of polishing compounds, and these are really for your clear coats. And what they are is basically an abrasive cream or powder. So if I take this lid off, you can see that's a cream, that one, but it dries, as you can also see, into a powder that makes quite a bit of a mess. So yeah, so it all depends on your genre of hobby. You don't really need polishing powders for military stuff. As a rule, you may possibly want it for canopies on an aircraft if they are damaged or scratched, or you've got bits to remove. So like the Airfix 124 Spitfire, where you need to take down a little seam in the middle of the canopy, you then want to be polishing that up. But what I'd say is I wouldn't buy polishing compounds until the point where you decide you've got to use it for a particular job, and then you've got them. These are quite handy. I use them on many things, and I think these are a good, nice to have, whereas this basically is an essential. So along with sanding sticks, having this is essential, because you can get into places with this, as I'm about to demonstrate, that you simply can't with sanding sticks. So we have primed this, and what we've got is some roughness in the overall finish, and then in some areas we've got a collection where it's even worse, and you can see it's quite rough. And that's from the first prime, which was done in black when we were trying to find imperfections, and possibly there was muck or dust or something that wasn't visible, and that got under the paint when we primed. So you've got all of those things going on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through my process for cleaning up. Now we've already done sanding on here, so I don't need to start at the coarse 180 grade. Then I've got, what's this, 240 and 320. I'm going to start with 320. So this is about understanding what you're doing. If you start with the coarse, what you're doing is you're putting scratches in. And then what you've got to do after that is remove those scratches on top of whatever you've sanded down or sanded into shape. So you've got to be mindful of that. So don't start coarser than you need, because you're just creating work for yourself. The reason why we're going in opposite direction, if you imagine my fingers are ridges after you've been sanding with a coarse grit, so you've got low points and you've got high points. If you continue to sand in that direction, what you're doing is you're continuing to put low points and high points in the same direction. If you sand in the opposite direction, you're actually taking those high points off a lot quicker, so you get a much better result much more quickly. So I need to get into these two areas here on either side of the rear window and clean those up. There is no way I'm going to do it with this. I can't get right up to the window seal with that. I certainly couldn't do it with a sanding stick, even a small sanding stick. So that is where the paper comes in, because I can do anything with paper. It's much more flexible than sanding sticks, and I do recommend that everybody has wet and dry paper, regardless of what it is they like to model. And we're just going to take a little bit out. So what I've done is I've just cut a little bit out, and I'm going to fold that in half like that. And that gives me something I can use, and I can get right up there. And I can use, I'm just going to fold this again underneath so that one end is longer than the other. I can use this end here to get right in. You see, I can get right in there, which I couldn't do before. So the reason for folding it in half is it just gives it a bit of strength and stops this flexing about. It just makes it more sturdy. Is the basic reason. Right, let's zoom you guys in so you can see what we're doing. So I have some coarseness around here and I want to take that out, so we're just going to strip that back very carefully. So the aim here is to get this totally smooth. We can see the black primer coming through already. And you can see on that first pass there that what we've done is we've done that dry. The reason we've done it dry is we don't want to be making a paste, like a cutting paste, which is what we'd get if it was wet. We'd probably get a better finish and we'd get a better cutting action wet. But what I want to be able to do is see what this looks like. So I'm going to put my magnifying glasses on now so I can see the surface. What I'm really interested in is the surface. If I was doing this wet, then what would happen is I'd have to wash it away and clean it, so it becomes a little bit more difficult. And right now, because I'm using coarse abrasives, all I really need to be doing is clearing the field. Think of it very much as a roughing out stage. So I'm getting right in between the seal and I can already see that's a lot smoother. And you can see a lot of the dust particles around there are black, and that's because that's the lumpy primer that we're removing. So, I mean, that already feels under my finger a lot better. So we can also use this just to do some tidy up and make sure that we're happy that we've got nice straight edges around our seals there. So once you get the grey primer on, it really shows up anything that's imperfect. And I am trying to get this as perfect as is within my capability. So that's time and patience to deliver what I'm really looking for. And you have to be methodical with these. You've got to go to each panel and check each panel and go, right, where are we at? So I've got a little hair or something in there, and just by going over the top lightly without pressing, I can remove that away, and that's just helping to smooth that. So I want to just do exactly the same on this side. I don't know if you can see all that lumpiness in there. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to look around the whole of the body and see where we've got any big imperfections. So any hairs or anything like that, and we're just going to lift those out as a starter. Got a little bit of rough sand in there that I don't like, so we're just going to take that back a little bit. Now where we've done some scribing, you quite often get a bit of a rough edge, so I'm just going to smooth that a little bit. Just follow the scribed line a little bit and just make sure that I'm happy there's no plastic that we've scraped out that's still in place. Okay, so you get the idea. So I'm going to continue going round and then I'll come back to you when I'm at my next step. Okay, I've been around and taken the worst bits off. I've also put a little bit of filler in that one area that absolutely needed it at the front. So what I want to do now is drop the grit. So I've gone down to a 600 grit, and just to give you a feel, a lot of packs of sanding sticks, they'll stop at about 600 and we're going to go beyond 600. So 600, we're going to go back in and do some more smoothing. Now I said you go in an opposite direction, and that's all well and good if you're doing a roof, nice and easy, but in small areas like this, it's very, very difficult. To go in the opposite direction, I've got to go up and down. Well, I can do, but it's not easy, and that's going to get harder. So partly you do it where you can do it, but an alternative to going in one direction then another direction is to go circular. If you go circular, then every time you go over it and circular, that also works. It doesn't work as well as going in the opposite direction, but it does work. So I'm just going to take this down, because what we've done is we've taken off the worst, but we've left unevenness, and if we don't treat this, the rest of the body will be nice and shiny and it'll look sort of rough round here and it'll stand out like a sore thumb. And also on things like car bodies, how your light is interacting with your final gloss coat is the key to it looking not just shiny but smooth. So if it's not equally smooth, it's absolutely going to notice under light. So I'm trying to go in a circular fashion. I'm going up and down where I need to, and you can see that's taking that black primer back as well. We can see plastic for the first time. Now then, with this grit, the 600 grit, we're going to go around the whole thing one panel at a time and start smoothing this out. So I'm going to go in one direction all the way along, and you can see we're doing several passes. and that already feels smoother. So my 600 grit, the surface of my 600 grit is actually smoother than my paint was. And we can go in around the edges and do a little bit of detailing if we feel we need to. We have quite a big groove there where the body panel ends against the boot. And you can see we've done that dry as well. We are going to get to wet, but that'll be on the next level. So I'm just going to do this in the same direction, so remember. You have to be careful not to round edges off that you don't want round off. In this instance it's okay, it's fine, but sometimes you've got a sharp edge and you don't want to lose it. And this has a slight flare, has a slight kick up, and we don't want to sand that out. So you can see, I think you can see, doesn't come out on camera so well, but can you see that dark line there? That's where the boot comes down and then there's a little kick up. So that darker line means I've not got in with the sanding quite so well. So I'm just going to go in a circular fashion and make sure I've got that nice and smooth as well. And you can already see that that is lighter than that. So we are making a difference. So that panel is feeling a lot smoother already. So I'm going to carry on. Where you've got big panels, like say the roof here, I treat every panel as one job, but with the roof, because it's so big, I might treat this section as one job, the flat surface on the top another, and that as a separate, and the pillars separate. So just break it down into manageable areas so that you're focused on an area, and by focusing on an area you're looking at the detail, and that's what we're really looking for at this moment in time. Now I can see under the surface of the primer here some scratches which are going in that direction from previous sanding, so I'm going to make a point of going in a circular fashion here just to take that back. And what we're doing is gently removing every imperfection, marks that we've made when we've been sanding, hairs and what have you, and we're getting everything slowly but surely nice and smooth. Okay, I'm going to carry on. I'll come back to you when we're doing the next step.